And thank you for joining the Technology Leadership Council at the Irving Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce. This is our speaker series presentation. I'm Trudy Van Horn. I've been the board vice chair of the Irving Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce Technology Leadership Council for a couple of years now. Our closing TLC speaker series presentation is a fireside chat with John Humphrey. He's a serial entrepreneur, a tech startup advisor, and author. And John's passion is building lifelong connections, something that all of us can learn from and something that I will take with me as well as I leave the chamber. But before we get started today, the conversation is brought to you by the Irving Chamber of Commerce, as I talked about. And now I'll get started to introduce our guest speaker. John Humphrey is a friend, a life coach, an author, and a recognized Texas technology entrepreneur. John's impact is on technology and leaders throughout DFW, making not only their businesses better, but also their lives and careers. So John, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Great
for
to be
joining me. It's great.
Yeah.
So John, you've been a tech entrepreneur for a number of years. Tell us about the favorite companies you've worked with or have started or that you partner with.
Yeah. So, we did collaborate a little bit on ideas. And so I was thinking about all of the tech companies that I admire in the marketplace today. And I'll just pick four because they have their roots in a little company that was at the Infomart that I was a partner at called Tactica Technology Group. And that company was bought by Hitachi Consulting. And over the years, it spun out Pariveda Solutions, the company that I started in 2003. One of our partners became the CEO for a long time of Credera, Rob Borrego. A guy I hired at Pariveda, Matt Rosen, started a company a few years back called Aleda. And then on the advisory board of a company called Headstorm are some of those founding folks from Tactica. So they're all really, the thing that I love about these companies is that their mission is about growing talent, and they understand that talent is dear in the marketplace. And so they find young folks, they have universities, they have mentor programs, they have really great expectations frameworks for people to promote themselves through the organization. So very few people realize that the DNA of all four of those institutions goes all the way back to a company called Tactica.
That is great to learn. So, you talk about people bringing in new talent and getting new talent up and running. So all of us are struggling in talent today in the DFW area, particularly in tech. What's the special sauce?
Well, it's one thing to say that people and talent are important. It's another thing to completely define your business model around finding and growing and deploying talent. And the commitment that you have to have as a company is enormous. I mean, just think about mentorship programs where mentees actually pick their mentors, and an expectations framework that gives a roadmap for employees to know, what do I have to do to be promoted? And so, the secret sauce is being really, really committed to your people first. I was with one of those companies, and he was talking about a meeting that they were having at a very large Fortune 500 company, where that company in the middle of COVID wanted their employees to come back. And they were telling this firm that they were going to have all of the consultants back on site. And they were actually making the decision to tell the company that they were not going to come and that they would have to find another firm. And just about that time, their whole IT shop got COVID, so everybody went home and they didn't have to. But I mean, just think about what that means for a company where you've got 25 people deployed, and you go to the CEO and you say, "I'm sorry, I know everybody likes working with you, but we're going to have to stop." I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road, I think.
At Pariveda, I have some buddies that are at Pariveda, and I think that is a particularly unique way of, I'll call it onboarding and culture inculcation. Would you mind saying a few words of that? I know that we didn't talk about you talking about this, but it is so interesting.
Well, I mean, I was employee number one. I quit Hitachi Consulting in 2003. I think Bruce joined me in October or November of that year, and we incorporated and we started, and we grew very, very quickly. But from the beginning, the first thing we did was we defined an expectations framework across 5 dimensions at roughly 12 levels of talent in the firm. And everybody at every level made the same amount of money. So there was no gerrymandering comp. If you wanted to get promoted, you got promoted. And, they've just gone on. I left after a decade, and they've gone on to, do great things. And it's just a fabulous company. And it's just a testament that if you invest in your people will build the business. I think it was Zig Ziglar that probably said that originally.
So switch gears a little bit to startups. I know you work with them and you have some advisory roles with them. So what is it you love? You're an adrenaline junkie, or what advice do you give? Why do you give that? How do you come to work with them?
Mostly nuts, I guess. Not very many companies get to $1 million in revenue, and I think it's 4%. And only
really that low?
Yeah, only 0.4% get to 10 million, and only 0.01% get to 50. And so I guess I like the ambiguity and the disruption. I don't think you can be successful in the IT services business unless you really understand how to operate in ambiguity. I'll give you a great example. Those firms are typically out of business every 90 days. I mean, if they stop selling, the payroll is substantial. And then the disruption, it is so much fun to be with people whose brains are solving problems that we haven't even thought of yet. We used to talk about it being the unknown, unmet need that a particular company had. And so I think one of the reasons you hire smart companies is that you can find skills everywhere, but you can't find big brains that can help you reinvent your business. And I think that's what I love doing. It's just always been a passion of mine to think about solving problems.
When you work with those startups, what are the critical items in the cookbook that you have them watch out for? What are the things that your advice, you always manage to give them in advice? What are some of those things?
Well, my framework for companies is we talk about their offerings, we talk about their sales model. I mean, if you build it, they probably won't come. So you got to go find out who your ideal client is. You got to figure out how to segment the market so you can talk to that client, and then you got to get them to buy. And I would say that the next thing is cash flow. We grew so fast at Pariveda that we ran out of money many, many times. I mean, you sort of think about the consulting world, I probably make 12 to 14 payrolls before I get paid on the work that I hired those people to do. So if you grow at scale really fast, you better have a really good banker or a lot of cash. I mean, cash is usually king for startups. These days, if you're a well-funded startup, you're really well-funded, 40, 50, $60 million. But for the guys that are trying to, bootstrap, it's cash flow's king.
So we've got a question that came in on the chat. Even though you're a tech entrepreneur, what are some of the personal guiding principles that have contributed to your success? And can they translate to any entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think, there was an old saying, I think it was Arthur Anderson, way back in the genesis of their company, where they said, think straight and talk straight. And I've always loved that because I think there's too much techno speak out there. And so I think you have to have high integrity. You have to tell people what you can't do and be willing to admit that you can't do it. You got to always do what you say, even when it hurts and even if it costs you money. You always do what you say you're going to do. I mean, it's like, what is that? That's that book, everything I learned in kindergarten. It's all the stuff your mom said, be nice to people. And I would say today, the biggest challenge that I see out there is that people have stopped being nice. And the pandemic has stopped civil discourse. And so I think just trying to be respectful that people have a point of view that's different than yours. That doesn't mean they're a bad person. That just means they believe something differently. And I think that, trying to bring people together in that way has been really critical.
I do believe people's tempers and angst are running hot and high. And so what are, you've talked a little bit about this, but tell us, I mean, it's got to lead into your book as well, right? What is the thing we need to be doing more of?
Well, I mean, I could unwrap this one for 2 hours, I think. This is what I said to a management team of a services company this morning on our weekly call. I said, people are at wit's end. Their fuses are short. They're probably blaming their employer from all of this angst in their life, and they think the grass is greener. So you better put a big hug around them and find out what people are thinking, and go on a listening tour inside of your own organization to make sure you know what people are upset about. And sometimes they don't know, and so they just like, well, I'm going to change my job, which isn't going to change anything. So, in the talent world, everybody's poaching everybody else's people right now. And so you really got to put a bear hug around your folks and find out what is it that you can do to make them a little more sticky.
I love my team. I think my team is under the most stress they've ever been. And even finding the time for a quality hug is really, really hard.
Yeah.
How can we be more genuine and thoughtful and intentional?
Oh my God, there's a bunch of books that I've just finished reading. Simon Sinek's Begin with Why. Gary, The One Thing. And I love a quote in his book because he says, what is the one thing I should do today that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Right? So it's the idea of, can't I just engineer the defects out of my process as opposed to hiring more QA testers, And so if people are the most important thing, then that should be the first thing that you do every day. You should have it on your calendar. You should figure out a way to touch them in multiple ways. Sometimes it's just, hey, I was thinking about you this morning. Sometimes it's, here's a gift card. Sometimes it's, hey, let's all blow off Friday afternoon and go hit a white ball around a golf course or go explore hiking somewhere. I just think you have to decide what the most important thing is, and then really be disciplined. Then the next book that I was reading is called Atomic Habits, which is about having the discipline to do the little things over and over and over. I think that answers your question.
What is one of your atomic habits that is a go-to for you?
Exercise. I try to walk 3 to 5 miles 5 days a week. And about 5 years ago, I was in a Starbucks and I ran into an old friend and he looked really good. And I'm like, man, you've been working out. He said, the best thing I've ever done in my life is hire a personal trainer. And so I found one and I've been going twice a week for 5 years. I'm no spring chicken. And so if I want to do what I'm doing for another 10 or 20 years, which I love to do, my go-to is trying to stay fit. And that sort of feeds so many different things. That feeds me listening to podcasts and reading on Audible, reading, and things that keep my mind sharp. And so that's kind of my one thing. I try to do that almost every day.
I love that. And everybody said that's a great stress reliever and gives you a goal that you can check off every day, which is also important. As you know, I'm part of a 100-year-old corporation, right? And we're still very entrepreneurial. Sometimes we're like a 100-year-old startup, wildly successful, but very different from some of those startups that you work with. So, what are some of the lessons that the 100-year-old company can learn from the 6-month-old or year-old or 5-year-old startup? What are some of those lessons you think translate?
Well, so I did a little research because it's always been fascinating to me why large companies are so resistant to change. It's almost like they think that the way they're doing it now is the way they're going to be doing it forever. And 40% of the Fortune 500 will not be in the Fortune 500 in a decade. Isn't that amazing?
That is astounding.
If you go back to 1955 and you look at the Fortune 500, 90% of them are gone. So that's essentially, I wasn't born in 1955. I was born in the early 60s. But that's essentially in my lifetime, 90% of those companies have gone away. And so I think the first thing that leadership has to set for their company is that, I've heard this great phrase. I tried to find out who said it, but it's like, eat your own lunch or somebody else will. And it's almost like, well, what does startups do? What is so beautiful about capitalism? I think it's the process of creative destruction. It's like the best idea wins. Bezos started in the book business, and now we wouldn't have survived the pandemic without Amazon. And look at the companies that are just kind of disappearing, and then it's so exciting to watch. There was a period of time when like Walmart was just getting hammered by Amazon, and they went out and they made some acquisitions and they got really, really good at store delivery and e-commerce. And, they're almost a bigger e-commerce business now than Amazon. They're fighting back because they're eating their lunch. They're taking the sacred cows of the business and saying, somebody's going to disrupt this. And so why shouldn't we disrupt it? I mean, I've seen companies act like venture capitalists by funding startups inside of the big company, and giving them the freedom to do what they need to do. I had a really cool interview with a woman from I think it was Essilor, and she reported to the chief marketing officer, and the chief marketing officer reported to the CEO. And they were doing some really fascinating stuff around finding classes of people for eyeglass wear that was outside of their traditional channels, right? So they were cannibalizing their own channels to try to not become irrelevant in the eyeglass world. So I think it's stuff like that, but it takes leadership.
Yeah. So some days it's hard to get up and fight the battle one more day. And I feel like I need to fall in love with my job all over again. I know that we all have days like that. So give me some advice about falling in love with my job all over again, or my company all over again. Because I think with this high stress time, we need a few of those fallbacks to fall in love again.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to just really sound hokey, but I think you just got to be grateful.
That is lovely.
And just, it may be stressful, it may be crazy, they may make bad decisions, but guess what? So do I. And, I try to wake up. I've been through some things in my life that were very, very difficult. They were life-changing events. And, I look back on some of those and it's really hard. You don't want to say it out loud, like, oh, I'm kind of grateful for that because, I was on my back staring up at the ceiling. And so, look at the world, get your eyes off of yourself and look out there and realize that the people that are on this call are probably in the top 10% of wage earners on the planet.
Wow,
I mean,
that is something. That is really something.
Worse.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I used to tell that to our employees all the time. I'm like, you guys are 1%ers, and you're 24, you're 26. I mean,
isn't that fabulous?
Yeah,
I love that. I love that. Okay, switching gears. So what tech are you most excited about?
I'm excited about a lot. Three categories. One, I think, would be the virtualization of the workforce. I think it's just getting started. I think power has moved from the employer to the employee, at least in the technology world. And so all of the things we now sort of take for granted, like Zoom and Teams and collaboration, and it's just remarkable. I think it's going to actually change the way work is done, and it's going to make us more productive and at the same time. And so, it's hard. I miss the people. I miss the office, and so it's going to be a whole new flexible working environment. And I think the companies that challenge themselves to figure out how to maintain culture and have a distributed organization are going to win. So that's the first big trend. The second is there are these platforms popping up like Acquire Scale. You've probably never heard of them, small little company here in Dallas, that have this fully integrated marketing, sales, CRM platform so that little humdrum solopreneur can do email marketing, web marketing at the scale of a company that has 10 people in their marketing department. So that's fascinating. And then the last one is the ag tech space. I mean, I've got a friend that is in that world, and I got immersed in it a month ago, when everything from making farmers more productive to platforms that are beginning to sequester carbon. Most people don't realize that the largest source of carbon in the world is farms tilling the land. It releases carbon into the atmosphere. And so I think within the next 5 years, we'll be selling carbon credits as a cash crop for farmers. And it'll all be tech that makes it happen and traded and validated. And I think that's really that's the planet thing. And it's the cheapest way to fix the problem.
So we've had a lot of tech breakthroughs or new things introduced. I think the pandemic made everybody have more time to think up great ideas. So what tech do you think is under leveraged or underused or not appreciated, or any of those kinds of phrases?
I've been fascinated by this whole digital marketing, particularly because in my business, I'm doing one-on-one coaching to management team members, salespeople, to try to help them improve their game, expand their networks, follow a process. But if you look at the data that's coming out, the vast majority of buyers are about 65 to 70% of the way through the sales cycle before they engage with a representative of the company for the first time. So
how far? 60 to 70%?
Yeah, it's huge.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's Hubspot. So they're the engine that connects the website to the CRM, and so content is king now, and associating the content with the people that face the market and get all the search engines and all of that stuff working is, I think, becoming more mainstream. We all, in the last 5 or 10 years, we've all hired that SEO person that had this voodoo magic, and nobody really knows what they did, but they were really expensive and the results were typically mediocre. So I think now that whole thing is kind of coming to age, but you still have to write, you have to write good ideas, at least in the space that I coach in. I mean, you can't, when you're looking to solve some problem at NCH, you can learn a lot. You know who I am before I show up. You know where I've worked. You know the people in my network. You've probably asked a few questions about me. You've been to my website. You want to know if I've got a point of view. I mean, I walk in and I don't show you some deck and tell the story about blah, blah, blah company. So I think the sale, if you will, air quotes, is starting much sooner. And it's being driven by buyers like you and your team, really.
Do you think that we're Do you think that we're getting better at that? Do you see evidence of corporations really embracing that and doubling down on it, or do you think it is something that not enough are paying attention to?
I don't think it's happening at scale. I think there are the intellectually curious in every company, and they're the ones that are sort of cruising and finding out the answers to really improve their decision making. But I would say by and large, if you sort of think about it from a IT services perspective, you don't have to buy the Accenture brand anymore to guarantee some level of success, right? You can buy the John brand, or you can buy the Matt Rosen brand, or you can do the Lawrence King brand, and know that that guy, even though he's at a $20-30 million company, he's going to deliver the goods because that's what his life has said that he can do. That's way different than call KPMG, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think the little guy can play in the big guy space. There's
Yes.
more tools that allow the little guy and even to be preferred to the big guy.
Yeah,
So,
and I think there's a lot of little, relatively small companies that have outstanding cultures, and they know what their employees want. They know what they care about. They know what kind of nonprofits they want to work on. I mean, at Party Veda, our recruiting weekend for college students was, we partnered with Habitat for Humanity. So you'd come up and have a beer on Friday night, and we'd get up on Saturday morning and go build houses. Like we self-selected people out all the time, because if you didn't want to get up and serve your community, how could you serve each other if servant leadership is one of the core values of the company?
oh, I love that. That is
Yeah.
so great. It's always
it's
so
so
great to
subtle,
talk
right?
with you. Yes.
It's so subtle. And
Beautiful.
what you see is, hey, they got really smart people over there.
So I think that's a perfect segue into tell us about the philosophy of Connect for Life.
So
Tell
when
us
we,
about the book journey.
yeah,
and
so
all
when we
that.
started, so it's funny. Bruce and I met back at Accenture, and we decided to build this cool company, maybe, I don't know, 8 years before we did it. And it led me to quit Accenture and go learn how to sell. I'd never carried a bag. And so I did that. And then I ended up at Tactica. And when we started Party Veda in 2003, I'm like, I don't want to have a commission sales team. I want to teach everybody in the company how to connect, network, and sell. And, I think today, if you read the trade rags, I mean, they're 150 million in revenue with 950 employees, and they got offices all over the United States, and they still don't have any commission salespeople. And so how do they do that? Well, you start right out of school, you build this network. There was a great article, or a great piece in Adam Grant's book. It was this case study of a young tech Silicon Valley nerd developer guy. His name was Adam Rifkin. And at one point, this nerdy guy had the most Fortune 500 CEOs in his database in LinkedIn. And he won some big award for it. And so if you have this attitude of helping people and giving back, you can't possibly outgive your network. So what does that mean? That means you need an auto mechanic. That means you're moving to a new city. That means you need a new CPA. That means, oh, you guys want to upgrade your Salesforce thing. You might say, hey, you know anybody that can do this? So it's this network of reciprocity where if you genuinely want to help other people, then it's going to come back to you tenfold. You just can't outgive your network if you build one. And I've spent my whole career doing this. I mean, it was like, all things being equal, people would rather do business with people they know and trust. And so you got to become that person. And so the book really goes through, why networking, what are some of the tips and tricks, what are touch points? Touch points is my system for measuring every week all the different touches you have. And is that a connecting thing? Is that a networking thing? Did you publish something? Did you give something to a friend? Oh, I heard you're going overseas. Hey, you really ought to go to these 3 places in Europe, or whatever it is. And then the second half of the book is, sort of what's the processes you should follow to be successful in developing business.
So I have folks on my team who, we're an IT team. So we have a lot of people that are analytical and shy and, who've said to me, oh, networking's really not for me. I'm really uncomfortable in that
Yeah.
scenario. What is your advice for those kinds of
Yeah.
people?
I used to tell my kids when they were little and in school, you're either going to be a nerd or you're going to work for one. And because nerds rule. So I wrote the book for people, the people you are describing. And because this is what I do for a living, I'm like the deal whisperer. I get inside people's heads and I try to figure out what is it that's holding them back. And so, what's so cool about what's happening now around digital marketing is it's giving voices to those people who don't really want to be with other people. And so they can use the principles that I have in building a network and with publishing and writing. I mean, I just joined a thing to do 30 blogs in the next 30 days starting on October 4th. And so if you have something to say, there's lots of places to say it. And ultimately, in the tech space, we're looking for people that know how to make friends and solve problems. It's just not that complicated.
What's the worst piece of advice you ever got?
Quit your job in banking and get in the restaurant business.
And did you?
I did. I had 2 years of banking experience in Fort Worth and got into the K-Bob Steakhouse business when I was 24 years old. And I went from one restaurant to four restaurants to one restaurant in 3 years. And was dead, broke, married. Oh, it was awful.
And how about the best advice?
It's that. Like I'm not trying to be cute, but the older I've gotten, the more I realize that my failure as a young person has helped me navigate like everything in my life. I think about the early days at Pariveda where we were so cash strapped and trying to figure out how to manage cash flow. When on the outside, man, we're making money, we're making profit, the P&L looks awesome, clients love us, and we're looking at each other like, you got $1 in the cushion of your sofa, and the same thing in the restaurant business. If you don't have a good Friday night, a Saturday night, and Sunday lunch, you're not going to make it. So I would give people their paychecks after 4 o'clock on Friday every week because then I had three good meals to make payroll. So I think I think struggle. We all want to save our kids from struggle. We want to. We don't. Struggle's hard. It's not very popular. It is the best thing to prepare you to be an entrepreneur.
That's
Failure
great.
is a really awesome thing.
What technology are you most concerned about or afraid of over the next 3 to 5 years? Got any worry?
Yeah, I mean, I worry a lot about data privacy and privacy rights and cyber. It's when they start taking down hospital systems to where you can't get prescriptions and that's really destructive. So that bothers me but I'm also encouraged by some of the digital ledger technology that I think could apply for everything from, ensuring that your title to your home is not hackable. This carbon credit thing. I mean, I think if you think about a digital ledger where I could assemble a set of farms based on their carbon footprint and put that into something like a mortgage-backed security, I think that's really fascinating. But the thing I worry about is our personal freedom. What's happening in China with the social score and total, complete control of a society by surveillance. I think it's a little unnerving. I think I've not known very many people or organizations or governments that have given up the power once they had it. And so it's a disturbing thing.
And when we look at England, at one time, England had the most cameras installed anywhere in the world. I don't know that they're there anymore. Do you think that they're, whether they have that number one slot anymore? Do you think that their society has really been damaged by it or badly impacted?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a really good question. I do not have an answer for. I have children, and their attitude is, Dad, they already know everything there is to know about you. So
yeah, that's what everybody.
What are you worried about?
That's what I hear what a lot of kids.
I hear
say.
that a lot from young people, but when and not if, but when we have a digital dollar, right? Not Bitcoin, like when the U.S. dollar is in a digital ledger, and currency is no longer in circulation. I'm going to give you a bonus, and then the tax policy is going to say, Trudy, if you don't spend that $20,000 bonus in these three categories, it's going to disappear. I mean, just think about what can happen when you control the currency. And this is what China's working on right now. I mean, what's going to happen? It's so funny when you think about Bitcoin and the story about how it came to be, and it was this sort of anti-government thing, and they sort of gave the governments the keys to the kingdom, and every central banker on the planet today is trying to figure out how to make digital currency with their own currency.
Where do you think innovation is born? What is the setting? What is it that helps us create a culture or a venue or a culture of communication where we can be much more innovative? What do you think are the keys to that?
Well, politics aside, we still have the United States is just an amazingly free country, and ideas are rewarded extraordinarily. And so, I say iron sharpens iron, and we put those people together in places like Silicon Valley and increasingly in Dallas. There's much more private equity in Dallas today than there has been, in 20 years. And, good ideas tend to get better when good people are around the good ideas, and that spurs more good ideas. And I think it's because of the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech. And just because I don't agree with everything that you say, I sure do agree with the fact that you have the right to say it. And that's where creativity comes from. It's really going to be fascinating to watch what China goes through, because they're pulling all of their publicly traded companies back. They're taking them off the New York Stock Exchange. They've destroyed trillions of dollars in net worth and Ant Group and some of these companies, and so they're out shooting golden geese, and yet I think they still want that tech innovation that they've had for the last 10 or 20 years. So that'll really be interesting to watch, because if my theory is true and the golden geese are getting shot, then it says a free society and capitalism works.
So I've asked you a lot of questions, and this may not be what you wanted to talk about. So how about a little John freestyling? What have you got to impart? Some more John wisdom for us.
Oh my gosh. It's a little self-serving, but I think I thought for a long time of what my mission statement was going to be. And it came down to something very, very short, which is unlocking the value of human relationships. And, with all of the tech and all of the automation, we're still human beings and we still need each other. And I think you have to stay connected. I think all of these social media platforms and all of the tech is making us physically connected, but not emotionally connected. And so I think you got to work harder and harder to have authentic moments with people. And right? They say you don't see any hearses pulling U-Hauls. I mean, at the end of the day, what makes us think we have a full life is the quality of the relationships in our life. And so if that's true, then spend a little more time cultivating your connections. And, I have an exercise I teach people to do. I said, go into your LinkedIn every Friday afternoon and hit 20 people that you haven't talked to in a long time and just say, hey, I was thinking about you. It will be the most rewarding thing that you will do that week, because you will rekindle old relationships that at one point were really awesome in your life, and you just got busy and you just got away from it. But I'm a very lucky guy. I could, if my ox was in a ditch anywhere in the world, there's probably 20 or 30 people I could call, and they would get on an airplane and come get me. And I think that I reap that benefit because I've tried to sow my life into others. And so maybe focus a little bit less on us, on yourself, and focus a little bit more on other people.
So I want to read out some of the notes that I took, because these are great. Helping people and giving back, be grateful, think straight and talk straight, understand the unknown, unmet needs, make the commitment to your people first. Struggle is the best teacher for being an entrepreneur. Be a nerd or work for one. I'm going to have that put on my desk in a big thing. Unlocking the value of human relationships. Eat your own lunch or someone else will. Put a big hug around your people. Understand the one thing that by doing it today, everything else will be easier. And then hit 20 people and reconnect. It'll be really rewarding. I love that. These are great.
You're an extraordinary note taker.
Oh my gosh. My desk is covered with paper of notes and stuff.
That was fun.
That is really great. I have loved talking with you. Any other questions from the audience for John, the entrepreneur, the life coach, the friend, the author?
I have a question. Okay, John. So I'm asking for a friend. One of the UTD students that I'm mentoring, I was on a call with him today, and he said, he was asking me about, describe the U.S. work culture. Well, of course, it's different everywhere you go, but he's Indian, and he said, 90% of the population at UTD look like me. Where do I go to meet people that don't look like me so I can understand that? So, but he's a student, and, I gave him a couple of suggestions, but I wonder what advice you have as the ultimate connector, somebody that's a student. I told him, go join a racquetball club, or, look for something in the arts school or something. Yeah. But, what suggestion and advice would you have for that?
We're such a rich community with great universities. I would tell him to go build a network of students from SMU and TCU and University of Dallas. And I mean, just get to know them, exchange ideas, create a club around whatever, if he's a IT guy, create some interesting network, or get involved in, a lot of those schools have clubs around some tech that ends up being sponsored by some of the local IT companies. There's a great class that SMU does, and it used to be Jerry White, the owner-managed, the Cruth Institute of the owner-managed business. They do the Dallas Fast 100, and I think it's an 8-week evening class for entrepreneurs, and very wide range of folks that do it. And Simon Mack is the new head Fred over there, and he's brilliant. I don't know if you've ever met Simon, but he's like a Silicon Valley success story who decided after he made all his millions to get back into education.
Again, thank you. Love the wisdom, love the breadth and depth of your experience. It is heartwarming to hear somebody who's so successful still be so personal. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. That's the School of Hard Knocks as a great teacher.
Yeah. So that concludes our time again today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dexter and Portia, for your support in this. Thank you, everyone who came to my my last obligation as a TLC leader. And thank you, John, for making it so rewarding for all of us